Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive with us. This time, someone sent in something pretty wild.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a Murli, dated March 29th, 2025.
Okay, so a Murli, for anyone listening who maybe hasn't encountered these before,
Right.
essentially a spiritual discourse, right?
It is. And, we're going to try to figure out what it's saying about our existence as humans, spirituality, all that kind of thing.
Okay.
And it has a really interesting take on time. And the thing that kind of jumped out at me right at the start was this idea that history repeats itself.
Oh, wow.
And that you, as the listener, have lived through 84 lifetimes.
Okay, so we're jumping right into the deep end here.
We are.
I like it.
All right, so let's unpack this a little bit.
All right, so right off the bat, this Murli gets into how it defines the nature of God. And what's really interesting is this concept of God having a nyari mat, which you could think of as like a unique teaching. Almost like, how there might be similar apps on your phone that are doing very similar things, but they have a different underlying, structure.
Right.
Different core kind of operating system. So this nyari mat is presented as something distinct.
And it goes on to give two reasons for why it's so unique. Firstly, it distinguishes the Brahmins.
Yeah.
Now, I know
Voice.
anyone listening, you know this, but the Brahmins are the spiritual practitioners
Right.
on this path.
Right. Right. Yeah. Those who are sort of engaging with this specific understanding. Yeah.
Exactly. So it sets them apart. It fosters this unity among them. It's like having a shared language.
Right. Yeah. So it's creating almost like a community. It's very much about not just agreeing on something intellectually,
Right.
but really, coming together with a shared sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And then the second reason is even more significant, I think. It's saying that God alone grants Sadgati. And Sadgati is true spiritual liberation. So that's like the ultimate freedom. And it says that this is only possible through this understanding, this nyari mat. So the key takeaway here is that you're not just changing your status or anything. You're actually being given this potential for ultimate spiritual liberation. And it says this is unique to this understanding.
That's a huge idea. I mean, in spiritual terms,
That's
massive.
Yeah, and it's very clear that this is something that is exclusively for those who are kind of, the children, as it's called, those on this path. So you, the listener,
Right.
and others.
Right. It's not something that is generally understood or known.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Then it kind of moves into this very cosmic, very large perspective.
Oh, yeah. So now the scope is really widening.
Totally.
Yeah. And we get this really beautiful image of Sikalari Bache, and that translates to long-lost children.
Okay.
And they're coming back to the Bahad Kabab, the unlimited father, after this 5,000-year cycle. So this reunion is kind of like after a very long time, family members coming back together.
And it kind of draws this distinction between the Had Kabab, the limited earthly father we all know,
Right.
and this Bihad Kabab, this unlimited spiritual father. And it's just, people often remember this Bihad Kabab, this unlimited father, when things get tough, when there's sorrow, when the things we rely on in this world don't feel adequate anymore.
It's that feeling of, when the boat's rocking and you're looking for the anchor, that is really solid.
It really does tap into something very, very human, this experience of suffering and looking beyond the physical world for answers.
Yeah, definitely. And then the Murli goes on to paint a picture of Swarg and Narak. Right. So heaven and hell, existing here on earth, but at different points in this 5,000-year cycle.
And it says we're in Petit Dunia, right?
Yes, the fallen world.
Fallen world. That's why we hear this cry to Petit Pawan, right? The purifier of the fallen.
Purifier, yeah.
And this is like contrasted with Satyug, the golden age.
Right.
And it describes it as Nirvikari Raja, a kingdom of absolute purity and no vices, ruled by Lakshmi and Narayan.
Right. So a very different quality of existence, right?
Yeah, night and day. And it goes on to say why this knowledge has been lost over time.
Right.
Why we don't really know this anymore,
Yeah.
He says that other religions have preserved their stories, of their founders and origins.
Totally.
But people in India, it says, have kind of forgotten this fundamental, their heritage, their spiritual heritage, and this whole cycle that exists.
Almost like we've lost the first chapter of our own epic story.
Exactly. And then it introduces this whole idea of the world drama.
Yeah.
That it repeats itself endlessly.
Right.
And it says that religions like even Sikhism, Christianity, they were established later in this cycle.
Right. So it's a much broader kind of narrative that it's painting. Yeah.
Much, much broader. And then it ties this all into you, the listener.
Right. You, the listener.
And your journey through 84 births.
84 births.
And it says that throughout this whole process, you, as a soul, have forgotten your original divine nature.
Right.
As devtas, as deities.
Right.
And you've been through this entire cycle playing all these different parts. So you're listening to this now, you're like, wait a second, this is just one
point, yeah.
point in this massive
cycle, right.
cycle. It even gets into like Ram Raja, the righteous rule associated with the sun and moon dynasties.
Right.
And how it shifted to Ravan Raja, which is kind of the dominion of negativity and vices.
Okay.
And it says, souls moved from being punya atma, like virtuous souls, to pop atma, souls weighed down by negativity.
Right. So almost like a spiritual descent.
Exactly, a fall from grace.
Exactly. And it's really important to clarify here because there's this misconception about the number of births, right?
Right.
84 lakh is a very common number that people throw around. But the Murli very explicitly says that this is a misunderstanding. And it actually says that the cycle for each soul is 84 births.
84.
So that's a big distinction.
It is a big distinction. So we've gone from this very grand, very cyclical view.
Right.
To then we get to this idea of spiritual awakening.
Okay, yeah.
And it says humanity's current state is agoniened.
Agoniened. Yeah, the sleep of ignorance.
The sleep of ignorance. We don't even know we're in this cycle.
Yeah, almost like, you're living in a dream, but you don't realize you're in a dream.
Right, exactly.
Right, okay.
And it says the antidote to this is Jagriti.
Jagriti, yeah. Awakening.
Which is brought about by Gaian, spiritual knowledge.
Spiritual knowledge, yeah.
And it uses this really simple analogy, comparing knowledge to light. Light prevents us from struggling.
Right.
While darkness...
You wander around.
Yeah,
you bump into things.
You're going to bump into things.
Yeah.
And, then it goes back to spiritual status, right?
Right, yeah.
How we move from being puja, like worshipful in the golden age, to pujari worshipers in this fallen age.
Right.
So you go from like the leader to
the follower.
The follower. Huge difference.
Right. Huge difference. In terms of spiritual power.
Totally.
Yeah.
Again, it's just hammering home this idea that it's a cycle.
Right.
We go up, we go down.
Up and down, yeah.
And then it comes back to God's teaching, and how it is Nyari Mat that leads to Sadgati, genuine spiritual liberation.
Right, yeah. The way out, right. To get off this up and down thing.
Okay, so if we're in this fallen world, how do we make it to something better?
Okay.
Well, it introduces this concept of becoming a Raj Rishi, royal sage. And it says Rishi means pure.
Pure, right.
So it's about purification.
So purification is a big part of this path.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And it compares this to other spiritual traditions,
Yeah.
like purification through Shankaracharya.
Okay, yeah.
Who, was born.
Right.
Compared to Shivacharya, which is God, Shiva.
Right.
And through his teachings.
Gotcha.
And it says God enters a chosen body.
Right.
To give this knowledge.
Okay.
For the benefit of many. It's a petite tan, a fallen body.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like this divine intervention, right, happening at a specific time in the cycle.
Yeah.
Like a helping hand being offered.
Totally. And it's also a caution, right?
Yeah.
About Maya, illusion.
Illusion.
Especially during meditation.
Right.
It says it can distort our thoughts and speech, even lead some to believe they are Shiva or other deities.
Right.
So it's like this delusion can happen.
Yeah, that's a big one. So the advice here is to be really careful about those kinds of experiences, right? Whether they're internal or external, and to really clarify with the Father, with God, like, is this really authentic or is this, something else going on?
Right.
Yeah.
And it stresses this instruction from the Father, remember me alone.
Manabeth.
Manabeth, yeah.
Yeah. And that constant remembrance, remembering the Creator and the cyclical nature of creation is what brings true joy and progress towards liberation.
And it also touches on what kind of hinders remembrance, like karma bandhan.
Okay, yeah.
Like the bondage of karma.
Yeah. So it's like these invisible strings almost,
Exactly.
Tying us to, past actions that prevent us from really being in that kind of present moment and that connection.
And it even encourages us to ask the Father about everything.
Right.
and how to navigate these karmic accounts, these karma bog,
Right.
that we still have to kind of work out before we reach a karma itadavasta.
Yeah.
So it's like this stage where we're beyond karma.
Right. You're not bound by it anymore.
So it's both remembering and working through these karmic accounts.
Yeah, it's a two-pronged thing.
It is.
Yeah.
And then it kind of gives us a glimpse into what happens after this physical existence.
Right. Okay.
Talks about becoming farishte, angels or beings of light in Sukshvatan.
Sukshvatan, the subtle region.
The subtle region.
Okay.
And then eventually we return to Swarg, to heaven. So it's like these different levels of reality within this whole framework.
It's almost like, imagine there are these levels of reality, right? So you've got the physical that we see.
Right.
And then there's this more subtle, energetic kind of realm. And then there's the source, right? This Mulvatan, the soul world.
It even gives like practical guidance,
Right.
It says, 8 hours of karma yogi.
Karma yogi, yeah.
So that's acting while remembering God.
Right. Okay.
8 hours of rest.
Okay.
And 8 hours of remembrance.
Remembrance, yeah.
To cultivate purity. So it's really trying to give you a way.
Right, like a daily practice.
The daily practice to integrate this into your life.
And it's good to be clear here. It says that sleep doesn't count.
It doesn't count.
Like physically sleeping is not remembrance.
Yeah. It even talks about how this knowledge will spread through newspapers.
Right, so it's going to be more widespread in times to come.
But the core message is, remembering God dissolves sins.
Right.
Leads to liberation from sorrow.
Yeah. And then it talks about destruction. It says this destruction is coming, but it's part of this whole drama plan.
Right.
And it's followed by peace and Suktam, the abode of ultimate happiness.
Right.
And it says only one religion will exist at that time.
Right.
So again, this pattern, right? Of like transformation happening. Then it goes back to the 4 ages, gold and silver, copper, iron.
Yeah.
And says we're at the Sangam, the confluence age.
Right.
So this transition between iron and golden, and it's very specific about the importance of the true Gita being taught by Shiva himself.
Right.
And that this will make you a ruler of Sachkhand, the land of truth, heaven.
And it says that by listening to this true Gita,
Right.
you are in the process of becoming a resident of heaven.
Okay.
It's very empowering. And then it talks about how to imbibe these ideas, from the Dharana Kelye Mukyasar. So the essential points.
Right.
The first being remember the creator and creation.
Right.
And that will keep you in joy. So keep that big picture in mind.
Yes, stay connected to that bigger picture.
And then it says sever the karma bandhan.
Right, karma bandhan. Right.
So break those old karmic bonds.
Break those ties.
Through this whole process of remembrance.
Through remembrance.
And you'll reach that karma-free state.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And then it cautions about Maya.
Yeah.
During meditation.
Oh, again, Maya, right.
Again. Always. So be vigilant. Seek guidance from the Father. Don't make mistakes on this path.
Yeah, it's not a straightforward thing.
It's not. And then it gives a Vardhan, a blessing to become Sadashakti Swarup, eternally an embodiment of power.
Sadashakti Swarup.
Yeah. And you do this by filling weak souls with strength through your pure feelings and intentions.
Through Shubhavna.
Shubhavna. I think it's careful to explain what that is, right?
Yeah.
It says it means having pure intentions and goodwill towards all, but not forming limited emotional attachments. So it should be very expansive and all-encompassing.
And unlimited.
And it says true service is first being strong yourself.
Right.
And then using that strength you've received to empower others.
Right.
And he gives a slogan which is Alankar Brahmin Jivan Ka Shringar Isliye Alankari Bana De Hankari Nahim.
Okay.
So essentially it's saying that virtues are the true adornment of a Brahmin life. Therefore, cultivate virtues and don't be egoistic about the body.
Got it.
So very much about, inner qualities.
Yeah, the spiritual development.
Exactly, spiritual development. And then finally, it gives these avyakt aishar, these subtle, unexpressed hints.
Okay.
The first one being adopt a culture of truthfulness and civility in all your interactions.
Right.
And then it asks a very pointed question about anger. We justify getting angry when someone lies.
Yeah.
It's like, who's really right in that situation? So it wants us to kind of,
introspect,
look at our reactions. And then finally, it tackles this excuse of having a naturally loud voice.
Okay.
If technology can control volume,
right,
surely we can through silence and
Intention.
and intention. So it's calling for self-mastery,
Self-mastery.
mindful communication.
Yeah.
So this Murli, I mean, we kind of went through it, but it gives a very comprehensive framework
It does.
for understanding,
And
ourselves
it does. It does.
and the world.
Yeah.
It gives us this cyclical view of time, our journey through 84 births, this divine guidance, a path to purity. I mean, it's a lot to think about.
A lot to think about.
Think about your own journey,
Yeah.
as a soul through these vast cycles that keep repeating. What does it mean for you right now to wake up to your original divine nature, in this moment in time?
It really makes you wonder what your part is in all of this, this drama that keeps unfolding.
Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah. It really speaks to the inherent kind of curiosity that you have, to dive into these big questions. And I think this deep dive, even though it's, a lot of information,
Right.
I think it will give you a lot to consider, a lot to think about long after we're done talking.
Yeah. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Absolutely. My pleasure.